Okay, peeps, welcome back. So today we're going to be talking about Bitcoin and what the expected moves are coming up in the coming weeks. So with that being said, let's get it. Okay, so I'm actually not supposed to be able to make this video today. I am supposed to be at work. However, I was physically attacked at work by a coworker, if you guys can believe that. Crazy world, right? So I decided to take a leave from work today, but let's go ahead and get into the content. So, as of right now, we still have the MACD death cross on Bitcoin, as you guys can see here. The histogram is moving down. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is going to go lower, but this does look pretty bearish. However, we have had a massive green candle that still has 2 days to close here, as you guys can see. If we get a close of this, excuse me, I'm actually going to remove this line because I don't think that line's really very relevant. But if we get a close of this green candle above these previous candles here on the weekly time frame, that is considered to be bullish. That is a green engulfing candle. So pretty much we would also need to get above 65-ish K, 66K, somewhere in there. That would be the next kind of resistance to break after that. And then we'd be looking at 69K and 71.3K respectively. There is something actually that I wanted to point out here on the charts. If you guys follow us on X, you would have known that we were talking about this, but I'm actually, give me a second. I'm trying to see if, so it's most obvious on the daily, as you guys can see here, but we have this kind of inverse head and shoulders pattern. So you have your left shoulder, upside down head, and then your right shoulder. This is a bullish pattern. Again, the bearish version of this would be the flip. So it would be an actual head and shoulders pattern where pretty much we would get something like this. So a shoulder, a head, and then another shoulder, and then it kind of goes like this and then comes down. We don't have that. This is a bullish version here, as you guys can see. So yeah, pretty much outside of that, the breakout target here, as you guys can see, is all the way up at the top. So it's pretty close to previous all-time highs. It's not perfect, but it's pretty close. And that target is roughly about 72,500. Again, in all honesty, if we get that high on the chart, I'm kind of expecting Bitcoin to actually snap past all-time highs and go beyond 74,000 up to new all-time highs. So the next potential target above that we'd be looking at is kind of this diagonal line here, as you guys can see on the weekly time frame. This thing has been tested in previous cycles, so we're kind of looking at this thinking this may be a potential area that the bears might try to short at. Again, as of right now, that area is roughly 75,000, and of course we still have our bull flag target here, which is all the way up here at 93,000. I do think that's possible. If I go to the pi cycle top indicator here, you guys can see the bottom of this thing is 60,000 currently, and the top is roughly about 83,000. But you guys might say, well, if the green line is there, that should be the top, right? No, that's actually not true. So generally speaking, the price kind of bounces around before the most parabolic move of the bull run in between these two bands. And then once it breaks out, it has its massive move. So you can see it kind of bobbed around here in between the yellow and the green band. And then boom, just absolutely skyrocketed. Kind of a little bit here, as you guys can see, before the second peak. And then it did the same thing. In 2017, it spent a long time in between these two indicators. And then eventually broke out, came back, retested, and then took off massively to the upside. Same thing here, although we didn't really retest the green band. We kind of just took straight off out of it. So every single time this thing is broken above the bands, it's once the indicators actually cross, that's considered to be when the Bitcoin's pi cycle top indicator actually pops up. So that should, within 3 days or so, ideally indicate the actual top for Bitcoin. As you can see, these dotted lines kind of point that out. So oops, sorry about that. So once again, we're kind of looking for a move like this. So kind of a markup phase where it breaks out of the previous high, kind of moves up a little bit, down a little bit, then makes a little bit of a higher high, and then boom, starts taking off. You guys can see the macro cycle Fibonacci levels here. So basically the 1.618 all the way up to the 4.618 or 4.268 or something like that. So the target's roughly about 102,000 to 240,000. Again, I do think that I have said for the longest time that I think somewhere between 150,000 to 250,000 is absolutely a possibility. Again, that's not really all that high. I mean, that's like roughly about maybe a 4x the previous all-time highs, which again, for those of you guys that were around for Bitcoin in the last cycle, from the cycle low of that cycle to the cycle high, it did roughly about a 23x from 3,000 to 69,000. And once the price gets higher, it does require a lot more capital to push the price up. But I mean, again, we have the spot Bitcoin ETFs. I think you recently had Wisconsin adding some of the spot Bitcoin ETFs to their state balance sheet or something like that. I'll have to pull that up for you guys and take a look at it. I'm not sure exactly what the details are, but I managed to skim over it briefly. And then you have different governments trying to buy it. You have banks potentially trying to buy it. And we all know that banks can essentially create infinite money, because if you know anything about banking, you understand that the money that is deposited into the banks by customers is then lent out to create interest via things like car loans, home loans, lines of credit, credit cards. Well, maybe not credit cards, but the first three for sure. And then as for the rest of the details, I don't know. I mean, again, I'm not a investment banker. I'm not a banker. I don't know how all this works, but that's kind of the gist of how it works. So, and that's how they create free money within the bank, so to speak. So now going over to the daily time frame. So instead of getting the death cross, we have a golden cross here, as you guys can see right back here on May 5th, 2024. So this was a little bit ago, a couple weeks. And we also had the golden cross here on the RSI indicator. So you guys can see, this is actually a little difficult to see, but you guys can see we're already curling up on the EMAs, and we're about to get the triple golden cross here. We already have the yellow going above the blue and the red. We just need the blue to cross above the red, and the triple EMA golden cross will be confirmed. You guys can kind of see the death cross took place here, and we kind of chopped around. So we got this inverse head and shoulders and then broke out. Now the EMAs are starting to look bullish. So as soon as we get that, we'll get triple bullish confirmation here. The thing I want to point out is the last time that we got one of these golden crosses was all the way down here at 42,000. Now, I'm not saying that the price is going to move up in the exact same amount in dollar terms that it did before on Bitcoin, but we'll just throw these numbers out there for fun. So to go from 42,000 to 74,000 is a $32,000 increase. Basically, from this breakout point, the price would be at 63,000. So that would put the price of Bitcoin by the peak of the next move, assuming it replicates itself, at 96,000, which is slightly above this bull flag target. So it's actually a little bit up here, as you guys can see. So if I were to do the percentage moves, I actually need to zoom out, make sure I know where this is. So it's roughly right about here. To the swing high up here, you guys can see it's a massive, huge 75% move. So definitely nothing to scoff at for sure. Again, the S&P 500 on average returns about 10% per year. So you're talking about 7 years of returns in just a matter of months. But if I were to do percentage move from the golden cross, you guys can see it's not exactly perfect. The percentage move is a little bit more than the dollar amount, but it would come out to about 110,000, which again, I do think Bitcoin can go to between 150 to 250,000, assuming we don't have an accelerated cycle and we actually, the cycle plays out according to the 4-year cycle themes that we've seen over the course of Bitcoin and crypto. So again, the ideal cycle peak would be all the way out towards the end of next year. That would basically be in line with the cycle theory. So something else I wanted to go over here. Again, we did have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 months of green, and then we had a pullback month. Is that surprising? No. I mean, we're going up straight for 7 months straight. It shouldn't really come as a shock that we had a pullback. So last time we had this, we had 6 green months and then a massive 50% dump. So we had 3 green months after, and then of course we went up after that. Does that have to happen where we have a huge dump? No. I mean, I would still say the Bitcoin bull run is on at this point. I don't think it's over. I think the biggest risk, in my opinion, to the Bitcoin bull run is the Fed cutting rates. I say this, and again, the Fed cutting rates is actually bullish, but the markets, if the Fed cuts rates, there's a chance, and we don't yet know how the markets are going to react, but there is a chance the markets might actually see the Fed cutting rates as bearish. Okay. What do I mean by this? So when the Fed cuts rates, it eases monetary policy. It makes it more affordable for people and corporations to borrow. However, a lot of people perceive the Fed cutting rates as a bad thing because by the time the Fed cuts rates, the markets are like, "Oh crap, the economy is going down the gutter." Sell everything. That they kind of see it as a bad thing. Like the Fed's doing it because they have to, not because they want to, and that's generally kind of like a bad omen for the economy and stock prices. So we'll have to watch closely how the market reacts to the Fed's first rate cut, and I would say even probably halfway through the rate cuts. Again, I don't know how long it's going to take. It appears that there's going to be like a cut and then a skip and then a cut and a skip. Those of you guys that followed the rate hikes, you guys would know at the end of the rate hikes, they did like a hike and then they skipped. And then they did another hike and then they skipped or something along those lines. And then eventually they paused. Okay. If they do a cut, skip versus just cut, but in small amounts, month over month, the cut skip, in my opinion, would be more bullish for the markets. It would give the markets and the economy time to adjust slowly to going back into QE versus just cutting, 25 basis points for like 20 meetings straight, which would not necessarily be good. Again, you would think that the faster rate cuts would be a better thing, but it's actually not because again that gives way to the uninversion of the yield curve much faster, which ultimately is a bad sign because whenever the yield curve uninverts, and it does every time the Fed cuts rates, the market capitulates. That's just what happens. So again, that's the biggest risk in my opinion to the price of Bitcoin and the bull run as of right now. So I want to point out one other thing to you guys for Bitcoin before we get into the indicators. So this is generally what Bitcoin's prices looked like over a 12-month time frame or a yearly time frame, okay? Ever since the inception of Bitcoin. So minus this first move here, you guys can basically see we had 1 red, 2 green. But then I want to point you over to here to 2014, which again is still basically the majority of Bitcoin's history. We had 1 year of red. That was the bear market year. And then we had 3 years of green, okay? Again, 1 year of red, 3 years of green. 1 year of red, and we're currently in our second year of green. Okay. I want to point that out to you guys just to let you know if cycle theory is to remain true, we should ideally still have another year and a half of bullish price action in Bitcoin and crypto. And as you guys can see on the monthly time frame here on this last fat candle here, it did close above not only the candle bodies of the previous months in the previous cycle, but the wicks as well. Okay, so that covers the price of Bitcoin. Now I actually want to show you guys also Bitcoin dominance and USDC or USDT, sorry. So again, Bitcoin dominance is kind of in this wedge pattern. I suspect it doesn't look like this resistance here is going to hold, but we'll just kind of have to wait and see on that for the Bitcoin dominance. But again, ideally at some point it is going to break out of this wedge. When it does, it could break down somewhere up here around the 57, kind of 58 level. It could still keep going up. We'll just have to wait and see on that one, which would make sense because Bitcoin is technically not supposed to start running to new all-time highs until the end of this year. So the Bitcoin dominance could still go higher. That's possible. Okay, I don't want to rule that out. But when we see a drop off of this wedge and some kind of slam down from one of these resistance levels, that like a move like this kind of squiggly line here, that would ideally be when the alt season starts. Again, I think a lot of the Grayscale trusts will pump with Bitcoin, but the ones that are more altcoin related will probably pump when the altcoin or when the Bitcoin dominance drops and gives way to altcoin dominance. So you can kind of see what happened here last time. So this is the Bitcoin dominance going up as Bitcoin was getting ready to top. Then Bitcoin was kind of chopping around. Money flowed from Bitcoin during this time all the way down into the altcoins because you can see the Bitcoin dominance dropped massively. It got cut by more than half. So as of right now, we have not seen that move yet. And as for USDT, so pretty much anytime this thing hits this line here, it generally reverses because that indicates a cycle top. As you guys can see, based on the time frames of the USDT basically hitting an all-time low, which then it reverses off of because we're at the market cycle peak. We did see one of these here, and generally that would be kind of a bearish sign. But again, because of the timing of the cycle, I would say that likely this is not the end of the cycle, even though we see the bottom of this line here. Again, it did hit it twice in the previous cycle, and it's actually also hit it. It almost hit it a few times during the bear market of 2018, even though that doesn't or even 2019, which doesn't make any sense because the market was in a bear market. But you can see that it's not always been perfectly consistent as to when it times the top of a bull market. So just something to keep in mind with that. And we also do have a golden cross here, and we're coming off oversold territory. So as you guys can see, generally speaking, when that happens, the USDT dominance goes up, which means that money flows out of Bitcoin and altcoins into stable coins. But again, I think with the elections coming up, the Fed cutting rates, the Bitcoin cycle top eventually supposed to come at the end of this year. Trump, of course, has become accepting of crypto. I'm sure you guys saw that if you follow crypto news, but he's pro crypto now. And if he gets elected, I mean, bull market's on, which again, I'm pretty sure 100% guaranteed he's going to get elected. So everything will look good for the end of the year as far as I'm concerned. So now let's go over to the crypto Google Trends. So again, very low in terms of search volume. That means that we are early to the party, so to speak, in terms of this would encompass all of crypto, not just Bitcoin. Usually when we're near a peak, you guys can see it's like way up here. We're not even close to that, which again indicates that we are very early. And do keep in mind deadlines for the spot Ether ETFs are due this month, which we'll talk about in a later video. But you can see kind of a similar thing for Bitcoin. So it is trending up with these higher lows here. But again, we're not anywhere close to previous all-time highs. We were at 100 during pretty much around the all-time highs for the two previous swing highs. Right now, we're only at a 21, which indicates, again, in my opinion, Bitcoin is cheap and we are early on this move. So if you're in greed, we're back in the greed area. If you guys, I don't know if you guys remember, but I did say I thought that likely we were going to kind of swing in between 50 and 100. And that's pretty much what we did. I mean, it could go all the way down to fear if it does. I mean, it's golden buying opportunities, but as of right now, the fear and greed index is not super greedy, but it's not in fear territory. So I'd say we're good. We could still have quite a bit of upside for crypto. MVRV, still very cheap. Again, I suspect this thing to get somewhere probably between like a 7 to a 10, maybe a 6 to a 10, somewhere in there. By the time we hit the cycle high. And again, I do think that comes closer to the end or for Bitcoin, it comes somewhere between the end of this year to roughly about June of next year. That's just my opinion, but it would line up with the previous Bitcoin tops. So the Bitcoin rainbow chart, just gotta wait for it to pull up. So you guys can see we're still in the buy zone here. Generally speaking, anytime this thing gets in between HODL and maximum bubble territory, that's pretty much an indication that Bitcoin's about to hit a top of some kind. It could even get to still cheap and top out there, which again is 133,000, as you guys can see at current prices. If I were just to kind of move this towards, let's say, I don't know, Bitcoin's top theoretically isn't supposed to be until the end of next year. I meant to say that Bitcoin's supposed to hit all-time highs by the end of this year, not a top. So the top's supposed to be closer to the end of next year. But if I were just to kind of move out with this a little bit, we'll say October of next year. If it's in the still cheap territory, that's 215,000. If it's in kind of hodl territory. It's more or less roughly around that 150 to 250,000. So it could still hit hodl, or maybe still cheap if we see it somewhere up there. By that time frame, that may be an early indication to get out. Again, we just had halving, as you guys can see. If I go down here, you can see what the date was. So April 20th, 2024, that was just a month ago, which again is another indication that we are early in the cycle. So we already went over the pi cycle top indicator. I'll go over that briefly one more time here in a second. I don't know why this is popping up. Sorry about that. So again, we're not massively overbought. We're not massively oversold on the Newpol chart. It's a little expensive right now. I'd say this chart's a little bit more bearish. But again, Bitcoin could chop around for 6 months and do nothing, and this thing would just come straight back down. So a lot of the indicators would reset if that happened. Again, we laid out our theories that it could go up, could go down, could go sideways. I know, how original, right? But those are the possibilities. Okay. It doesn't necessarily have to rip to the moon and then hit all-time highs in 3 months. It could chop sideways for 6 months until the elections and the Fed cuts rates and all that, and then start ripping to the upside. Or dump. And then we see something like the pandemic of March 2020, where instead of it happening this year, it happens, let's say, next year in March, and then the market dumps, and then we see this insane rip all the way to December. That could happen too. So again, we're testing the yellow EMA. Generally, when that happens, any time before the peak of the bull run, it does end up pushing back up to the green EMA. So at the very least, we should see 83,000. If it breaks above the green EMA, well, the next thing we'd be looking for after that is a crossing of the EMAs on the pi cycle top indicator, which, of course, when that happens, I'll be sure to let you guys know. So anyways, hope you all enjoyed this content. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see y'all later. Peace.